There are three kinds of people in this world: good, evil, and stupid. The third kind, stupid, has been described as more dangerous than evil by many thinkers. Joss Whedon said about this, "I will take crazy over stupid any day." And in today's times, they are everywhere. We live in a world run by stupid nations, led by stupid leaders, surrounded by stupid trends. But strangely, while stupidity has been the silent force shaping history, few have ever broken it down completely. Its origins, its psychology, and its terrifying power. From ancient philosophers to modern thinkers, many have warned us about it. And yet, here we are. Today, I'm going to dissect stupidity. Why stupid people are so confident, why great civilizations collapse under its weight, why it's far more dangerous than we admit, and, most importantly, what we can actually do about it. By the end of this video, you'll see the world around you in a very different light, and you'll understand why stupidity might just be humanity's greatest threat. So, let's get into it. Stupidity has long intrigued thinkers, who see it as far more than a simple lack of intelligence. Both psychologists and philosophers note that it often involves stubbornly clinging to beliefs or behaviors that defy logic and evidence. In this view, a person is not stupid merely because they lack knowledge or cleverness. Rather, stupidity is a persistent refusal or inability to acknowledge obvious truths or consequences. One modern commentator describes it as the strong holding of a belief without any rational reason for it. In essence, it is allowing false assumptions or emotions to override reason. Different thinkers highlight different aspects of the problem. Theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer argued that stupidity is a moral failing rather than an intellectual one. Similarly, an academic study on the subject notes that the mind often functions as an instrument for belief, not for knowing, learning, or problem-solving, thereby obstructing sound thinking. In short, stupidity often takes the form of willful ignorance or misunderstanding, choosing comfort or convenience over truth. Bertrand Russell expressed this pointedly when he said, "Men are born ignorant, not stupid. They are made stupid by education." From a psychological standpoint, stupidity is viewed as a universal byproduct of human cognition. Experiments show that all people occasionally think or act irrationally because of mental shortcuts and cognitive biases. Psychologists refer to this as the "we're all stupid" paradigm. Countless studies reveal that nearly all human behavior is influenced by unconscious mental habits. Common examples include confirmation bias, favoring information that confirms pre-existing beliefs, and the anchoring effect, placing excessive weight on the first piece of information encountered. Neuroscience further explains that in moments of stress or urgency, the brain's instinctive systems can override its reasoning centers, causing poor judgment. In this light, stupidity is often the outcome of cognitive bias or error, rather than a lack of factual knowledge. Philosophers and writers, however, tend to focus on its moral and social dangers. Such individuals, they argued, are utterly self-satisfied and can become mindless tools for harmful purposes. Russell observed that as human knowledge grows, so too does the entrenchment of errors, since new information often strengthens mistaken beliefs. Oscar Wilde, with irony, claimed there was more to be said for stupidity than people imagine, while Mark Twain advised, "Never argue with stupid people. They will drag you down to their level and beat you with experience." These perspectives emphasize that stupidity is less about ignorance than about stubborn self-deception. Economist Carlo Cipolla proposed a set of laws of stupidity, beginning with the claim that its occurrence is unrelated to any other personal trait. He defined a stupid person as one who causes harm to others without benefiting themselves, thereby damaging both victim and perpetrator. For instance, by spreading falsehoods or making costly blunders. Cipolla also noted that people consistently underestimate the number of stupid individuals around them, reinforcing the sense that stupidity is both widespread and underestimated. One analysis puts it, whatever the conditions, stupidity is the failure to apply the appropriate schema effectively when needed. In essence, It is the misapplication, or outright rejection, of critical thinking, coupled with a refusal to learn from experience. Psychological research identifies numerous mental shortcuts that lead to poor decisions and ultimately makes a man an idiot. Overconfidence leads us to overestimate our own knowledge and abilities, leaving us convinced we are correct even when we are not. Groupthink and tribalism push people in close-knit communities to suppress doubt and conform to consensus, even when that consensus is irrational. Such biases, along with others like the availability heuristic and fundamental attribution error, mean that in urgent situations requiring quick decisions, slow, deliberate thinking is often abandoned. Under stress or social pressure, instinctive and emotional reactions take over. The brain's reasoning center, the prefrontal cortex, can be overridden by primitive regions, prompting even highly intelligent individuals to behave foolishly when frightened or rushed. Researchers note that we are not purely rational beings. The mind alternates between a fast, intuitive, error-prone system and a slower, more analytical one. Stupidity frequently appears when the fast, lazy mode dominates, letting gut reactions and prejudices dictate behavior. Everyone, regardless of intelligence or education, is prone to such lapses. We may feel utterly certain of a belief, trusting our gut, only to be proven wrong. Our minds are drawn to simple narratives and stereotypes, making us vulnerable to overlooking obvious mistakes. Social influence amplifies these tendencies. Slogans and catchphrases can quickly take hold of the mind. Bonhoeffer observed that under the sway of a powerful leader or ideology, people often relinquish independent thought, losing their inner autonomy and the ability to form their own positions. In such conditions, mass stupidity spreads as individuals uncritically repeat group dogma. Environmental and cultural factors also shape stupidity. Certain belief systems become stupid when they block the development of better ideas, more functional perspectives, or refined understanding. Even an ideology that prides itself on open-mindedness can become foolish if it treats all ideas as equally valid without evaluating their worth. Cultural dogmas and misinformation provide fertile ground for such errors. Historical conditions matter too. Extreme heat, isolation, or harsh living environments have been linked to passive conformity and mental stagnation. Because human brains are predisposed to believe before they analyze, falsehoods can take root easily and resist correction, while learning from mistakes happens slowly. One analysis likens it to an animal locked into a habitual response that blocks a better one. In humans, language and abstract thought have only refined this tendency, giving us the unique ability to defend and justify our mistakes with elaborate reasoning that no other species could manage. Ancient thinkers often traced stupidity to passions or divine infatuation, with Herodotus even attributing the loss of reason to the goddess Ate. Other authors emphasize its practical consequences. Bertrand Russell suggested that societal influences, including education, help produce stupidity, implying that it is learned rather than innate. The essence, according to these thinkers, is that stupidity involves the mind turning against itself. Oscar Wilde's ironic admiration for stupidity points to its ubiquity, while Mark Twain's warning about the futility of arguing with foolish people underscores a key philosophical point. Stupidity resists reason entirely, even when confronted with clear evidence. In literature and culture, the fool has been a recurring archetype. From Socrates, who praised awareness of one's ignorance, to Shakespeare, who wrote, "The fool doth think he is wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool." The contrast between wisdom and folly has been a central theme. These perspectives align with research showing that people often fail to recognize their own foolishness, which is itself a hallmark of stupidity. Immanuel Kant linked it to a failure of judgment, the inability to apply general concepts to specific cases. In short, history shows broad agreement that stupidity is a flaw in thinking itself, expressed in stubbornness, short-sightedness, or ideological blindness. While stupidity is not the same as ignorance, false premises provide fertile ground for it. In today's world, Information overload and echo chambers make this worse. Social media amplifies trivial or false ideas and makes it easy to find support for even the most absurd claims. In such an environment, even intelligent people can become trapped in collective falsehoods. Education can reduce ignorance, but it can also cement misconceptions if it promotes rote learning instead of critical thinking. The way a society educates its people can sharpen or dull their minds. Cultures that discourage questioning and value conformity produce more stubbornly held false beliefs. Isolated communities often see these beliefs become firmly entrenched, while environments that require constant adaptation tend to keep minds more flexible by forcing continuous problem solving. Stupidity thrives wherever independent thinking is discouraged. People who are isolated from contrary viewpoints are less prone to it than those immersed in persuasive, like-minded groups. This suggests that regular exposure to diverse perspectives and the habit of questioning authority are powerful antidotes. While we are defining stupidity, it is important to note that ignorance and stupidity are not the same. Ignorance can be remedied by learning, whereas stupidity resists knowledge. Admitting one's ignorance is the opposite of stupidity. Stupidity is a universal human flaw, shaped by both psychological tendencies and social dynamics. Its danger lies in the fact that it blinds people to their own errors. And this is where it becomes so dangerous, which is probably one of the most important themes of this video, which I'm going to discuss now. In Huxley's Brave New World, a population distracted by pleasure and propaganda willingly abandons independent thought, paving the way for tyranny. Orwell's Animal Farm depicts animals too naive to realize they have replaced one form of oppression with another, illustrating how simplistic dogma, aka stupidity, can entrench exploitation. Plato's allegories and Bosch's Ship of Fools satirize communities oblivious to danger, preferring indulgence over reason. Real-world parallels are just as sobering. Nuclear disasters like Chernobyl and Fukushima were made possible by negligence and the dismissal of clear risks. In each case, the refusal to heed evidence and the comfort of false certainty created conditions for catastrophe. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, writing from prison in Nazi Germany, warned that stupidity is often a greater enemy of good than malice. He described this theme better than anyone else. Evil, he argued, tends to contain within itself the seeds of its own undoing, but stupidity resists reason and remains impervious to evidence. Unlike malice, which can be identified and opposed, stupidity is unpredictable and difficult to combat. Bonhoeffer observed that those gripped by it push aside facts that contradict their prejudices and may even become aggressive when confronted. He stressed that stupidity is not a simple lack of intellect, but a condition that often arises in social contexts, particularly when people isolate themselves from diverse perspectives or surrender their critical thinking under the sway of propaganda. In groups, it can become a potent and self-perpetuating force. Carlo M. Coppola offered a similarly stark view in his Basic Laws of Human Stupidity, defining a stupid person as one who causes harm to others while gaining nothing in return. He warned that intelligent people consistently underestimate the damage that stupid individuals can inflict, and that such people can be the most dangerous of all. A decision that harms both the decision maker and those around them creates a particularly destructive ripple effect, sometimes on a societal scale. Historical analysis shows how misjudgments of this kind, such as government policies that damage the economy without yielding any real benefit, can drag entire nations toward disaster. This concern has been echoed across centuries. Martin Luther King Jr. warned that nothing is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity, pointing out that people can cause great harm without intending malice, simply because they are unaware of the consequences of their actions. He linked this form of blind ignorance to the kind of unthinking conformity that, in his view, had led to the crucifixion of Christ. Philosophers from Ibn Khaldun to Aristotle shared the belief that folly and unexamined assumptions lie at the root of many human evils. Aristotle in particular argued that wrongdoing through ignorance is pitiable rather than malicious, highlighting how ignorance and folly cloud moral judgment and distort truth. And in the modern era, observers argue that mass media and cultural trends have amplified this danger. Commentators have noted a persistent cult of ignorance in public life, fueled by the belief that one person's uninformed opinion is as valid as another's well-founded knowledge. Once serious discourse becomes an emotional spectacle, rational debate loses its force. Neil Postman warned that when television and infotainment dominate the flow of information, they foster passivity and sensationalism rather than active engagement and critical thought. In such an environment, important national decisions risk being reduced to entertainment, a transformation that undermines informed governance. This shift carries political consequences. From the warnings of Huxley's dystopian fiction to the cultural critiques of historians like Richard Hofstadter, the concern has been that anti-intellectualism, where charisma and bluster outweigh expertise, has taken deep root. In such climates, facts can become secondary to spectacle, leaving the field open to demagogues who exploit the public's preference for catchy slogans over reasoned debate. Oversimplified and sensationalized news creates a population accustomed to emotional persuasion, where bad policies persist because they are never subjected to serious scrutiny. The cost of such folly can be enormous. Eugen Rosenstock-Huessy observed that the tragedies of war and atrocity are more often the result of collective stupidity than the schemes of brilliant villains. Totalitarian regimes of the 20th century rose not simply through evil intent, but because ordinary people followed slogans instead of reason. Bonhoeffer noted that under authoritarianism, a surge of power can infect large portions of the population with stupidity, leading individuals, even intelligent ones, to repeat absurd claims automatically, as if under a spell. The result is that conversation with such a person feels like an exchange with a set of slogans rather than an independent mind. Through these reflections, it becomes clear that stupidity is not merely a personal flaw, but a collective hazard, a human weakness that distorts judgment, undermines truth, and corrodes moral responsibility. It thrives when critical thought is surrendered, when propaganda replaces dialogue, and when spectacle eclipses reason. Stupidity persists because it is not merely a lack of knowledge, but a deeper problem of mindset and self-perception. Education can fill an empty mind, but it cannot easily dismantle arrogance or willful folly. This stubbornness is reinforced by social and emotional forces, pride, fear, and the desire for belonging, that make it difficult for people to abandon their errors. True change often demands a profound personal shift, an awakening or radical transformation, which is rare. As a result, stupidity tends to perpetuate itself. Myths and misconceptions are passed down through generations. Online communities amplify and recycle them. And without conscious self-examination, the cycle goes unbroken. The consequences are severe. When stupidity becomes widespread, informed public debate withers and poor decisions go unchallenged in both government and business. Communities fracture as superstition overrides science, and valuable ideas are lost amid distrust and distortion. Misguided beliefs destabilize economies and make societies more vulnerable to manipulation. Democracies, in particular, suffer, not necessarily because leaders want a less informed public, but because ignorance has ceased to carry any shame. In such an environment, intelligence and foresight become rare, and short-sighted choices multiply. The danger lies in the subtlety of the threat. As Voltaire warned, those who tolerate absurdities open the door to the gravest injustices. There is one strange thing we often frown upon when we see confident stupids, and in most cases, they all are. Why? This is what I am going to discuss now. Those with little knowledge often feel the most certain, while the truly knowledgeable tend to question themselves. Shakespeare captured this centuries ago. The fool doth think he is wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool. In modern times, Psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger formalized this idea, showing that unskilled individuals frequently overestimate their competence, while experts, aware of the vastness of their subject, may undervalue their abilities. Their 1999 study revealed that students in the lowest performing quartile believed their results placed them around the 62nd percentile, when in reality they were in the 12th. Conversely, top performers often rated themselves slightly below their actual standing. The effect is not about overall intelligence, but about specific skills. Someone can be highly competent in one area, yet grossly overestimate themselves in another. This contrasts with imposter syndrome, where capable individuals underestimate their expertise. As Bertrand Russell noted, in the modern world the stupid are cocksure, while the intelligent are full of doubt. The core explanation lies in metacognition, our ability to evaluate our own performance. Incompetent individuals lack the insight to recognize their errors. Without the knowledge to distinguish a flawed solution from a sound one, they assume their work is good. This creates what Dunning and Kruger described as a dual burden. Poor performers not only fail at a task, they also fail to see how poorly they have done. Incompetence hides itself. Someone unfamiliar with grammar will miss their own mistakes, confidently declaring a faulty sentence correct. Lacking awareness of standards, they cannot recognize what they do not know. A related trap is illusory understanding, partial knowledge that breeds false mastery. A person who has read a single article on economics might believe they have found the key to fixing an economy, unaware of how shallow their understanding really is. Social factors also play a role. Past praise or achievements in unrelated areas can foster misplaced confidence. Success in one field may be wrongly assumed to guarantee competence in another, like an engineer boasting they could run the stock market because they excel at mathematics, ignoring the distinct skills finance demands. Layered over this is the better than average bias, the tendency for most people to rate themselves above average in many skills, such as driving. Combined with statistical effects like regression toward the mean, this bias ensures that those with the weakest abilities consistently overestimate themselves. Dunning himself emphasizes that this phenomenon is not about labeling others as hopelessly inept, but about self-awareness. The real lesson is to approach our own knowledge with humility, resisting the temptation to assume mastery too quickly. Overconfidence in the absence of true understanding is a trap that spares no one. The well-known Mount Stupid curve of confidence versus knowledge also captures the Dunning-Kruger pattern perfectly. When someone begins learning a new skill, their confidence often rises sharply, sometimes peaking at the peak of Mount Stupid, where they feel certain they understand the subject. Soon after, deeper learning exposes the vast complexity they had overlooked, and confidence plummets into the valley of despair. Only with sustained study and practice does their confidence slowly climb again, this time based on genuine competence, eventually reaching a stable, realistic plateau. At the start, novices lack the knowledge to see their own errors, so they rate themselves far higher than they deserve. The humor in the curve's name is matched by its accuracy. What feels like mastery at first is often just early overconfidence. A related framework describes skill acquisition in 4 stages that mirror this journey. In the first, unconscious incompetence, the learner doesn't realize what they don't know. Confidence is inflated because the task seems simple when only glimpsed from afar. Next comes conscious incompetence, awareness of one's own shortcomings. This is the low point in confidence, when the learner finally grasps how much they still need to understand. Then follows conscious competence. Real skill develops, but it still demands focused effort. Finally, unconscious competence emerges, where performance becomes second nature and confidence rests on a solid foundation. The early stages explain why inexperience so often pairs with certainty. Doubt only appears once the scope of the challenge becomes visible. The effect is visible in every corner of life. The pattern appears in smaller, familiar ways too. A dinner companion might confidently order the most expensive wine, convinced they can afford it, though you know they cannot. A relative might proudly present a terrible dish at every family gathering, blaming others for not appreciating it. Online debates overflow, with people asserting sweeping political opinions without evidence, certain they have the full picture when they have only fragments. Driving provides countless examples. Teen drivers, after a handful of lessons, may feel ready to push speed limits or take risks, overestimating their control and reaction time. Even experienced older drivers can fall into the trap, assuming decades behind the wheel guarantee safety while ignoring gradual declines in reflexes and awareness. Politics and leadership are equally susceptible. A leader might charge into a foreign policy decision, convinced it will solve a problem, without understanding the historical, cultural, or logistical complexities involved. History shows how overconfidence among the unskilled can have dire consequences. Ill-fated military campaigns like the Charge of the Light Brigade, or you can say Napoleon's march into Russia, bore elements of this same flaw. The cultural resonance of the idea is so strong that it has become a meme. T-shirts with the Mount Stupid graph and labels like Peak of Mount Stupid poke fun at unjustified confidence, but they also convey a reminder. As David Dunning himself has said, the point is not to ridicule others, but to recognize the need for humility in our own judgments. The true lesson is that none of us are immune to the trap of thinking we know more than we do, and that awareness is the first step to avoiding it. The Dunning-Kruger effect is widely recognized, yet it has its critics and complexities. While the basic pattern is well established and has been observed across many fields, even in judgments of qualities like attractiveness or humor, researchers continue to debate exactly why it occurs. One proposed explanation is that the phenomenon may partly be a statistical illusion caused by regression to the mean. When self-estimates are plotted against actual performance, any imperfect correlation naturally produces a pull toward the average. In simple terms, those who perform poorly are likely to score a bit higher on a second attempt due to random variation, while top performers often score slightly lower. Combine this with the common human tendency to believe one is above average, and the resulting graph can resemble the classic Dunning-Kruger curve, even if no psychological bias is at play. Simulations have shown that when people simply guess answers, the same crossover pattern of self-estimated versus actual scores emerges. This has led some to argue that the effect can be reproduced by random chance and statistical math alone without invoking faulty self-awareness. Another nuance is that the extreme image of the unskilled and completely unaware person seems less common than popular culture suggests. Studies have found that only about 5 to 6% of people score very poorly while also having no idea of their low performance. In replications, researchers have shown that both novices and experts misjudge themselves. Novices tend to overestimate, while experts slightly underestimate. But the magnitude of error is simply greater for the less skilled. In this light, the effect may not describe a large, oblivious group so much as a universal human tendency toward imperfect self-evaluation. Other interpretations exist as well. Under the positive priors model, novices are not willfully ignorant, but are making optimistic guesses, which naturally lead to inflated self-scores when their real performance is low. Task difficulty and the distribution of scores can also influence how self-perception aligns or misaligns with reality. Most researchers agree that overconfidence is real, but its exact causes may blend cognitive bias with statistical effects. Regardless of the debate, the real-world implications remain important. Self-assessment is often unreliable, and those who trust a quick gut feeling about their competence can make costly mistakes, whether it's a pilot overestimating readiness, an engineer overpromising a design, or a novice surgeon taking on a risky procedure too soon. Overconfidence can steer people into unsuitable careers, cause them to skip essential training, or lead them to put others at risk. Meanwhile, high performers who underestimate themselves may pass up opportunities they are perfectly capable of handling. The safer approach is humility, which not only protects against dangerous errors, but also encourages continued learning. Ultimately, the Dunning-Kruger effect is not meant as an insult, but as a caution. It highlights the truth that genuine expertise often comes with a deeper awareness of complexity, which naturally tempers confidence. As Darwin noted, ignorance more often breeds certainty than knowledge does, a sentiment echoed by philosophers and writers throughout history. The wise person accepts the limits of their understanding and remains open to correction. In practice, that means seeking feedback, verifying facts, and remembering Socrates' admission. I know that I know nothing. Confidence should be the product of competence, not its starting point. The curve of learning always contains its own Mount Stupid, and the best safeguard is to climb it with caution, check every foothold, and recognize that beyond each summit lies a far steeper ascent. Now that we know the psychology of stupidity, I want to talk about its political philosophy. George Orwell's 1984 captures the irony of this chapter in the party's slogan, "Ignorance is strength," part of the infamous creed alongside "War is peace" and "Freedom is slavery." The point is clear: a regime's power depends on its citizens' inability or unwillingness to recognize contradictions. When people are confused about reality or unaware of the truth, those in power can maintain control with little resistance. This dynamic is no mere fiction. Throughout history, political leaders have benefited from keeping the masses uninformed. Rulers often prefer to appeal to ignorance rather than reason. Aldous Huxley once noted that even in the most powerful democracies, politicians and propagandists appeal almost exclusively to voters' ignorance and irrationality. They rely on catchy slogans, simplistic myths, and emotional triggers, bypassing facts to discourage critical thinking. Emotional, misinformed crowds can overpower sober reason, and leaders know how to exploit this for their own gain. Propaganda operates by targeting a shared fear or desire, then linking it to a fabricated solution through symbols and slogans. Huxley described it as finding a widespread unconscious anxiety and building a symbolic bridge from reality to a dream that soothes it. In practice, this means dressing harmful or dubious policies in the language of hope, pride, or belonging while obscuring their real purpose. A war can be sold as patriotic duty, feeding fear of an enemy, or as a noble mission, appealing to a longing for purpose. Advertising works the same way. Toothpaste promises not just cleanliness, but relief from the fear of being unattractive. In every case, logic is bypassed and emotion takes over, a formula dictators and demagogues know by heart. Such manipulation allows lies to persist even after exposure. Propaganda can be so powerful that people continue to believe a falsehood long after it has been debunked. Modern psychology confirms that repetition breeds credibility, the truth effect, especially when people crave social belonging. Conformity compounds the problem. As social creatures, we tend to accept the group consensus even when we privately disagree. If everyone around us repeats a slogan or rumor, we are more likely to adopt it ourselves. In the age of viral media, misinformation that might once have been confined to a campfire circle can now reach millions in moments. As critic Esther Villar observed, the nonsense once heard by a few can now flood the minds of countless people at once, transforming questionable claims into unquestioned truths through sheer repetition. Leaders also manipulate perception through selective facts and spin. They cherry-pick data, twist statistics, and present debates as if two sides have equal merit, even when expert consensus overwhelmingly supports one. This illusion of balance sows doubt and strengthens ignorance. Emotional scapegoating is another weapon. Blaming immigrants, minorities, or political opponents for society's problems stokes fear and anger, distracting from real issues. When emotions run high, rational policy evaluation disappears. Dissenters are cast as threats, while leaders present themselves as the only protectors of the people. Crowds, in their incredible stupidity, may cheer the very leaders who foster their hatred and suppress critical voices. Some regimes go further, using outright censorship to control knowledge. History is rewritten, textbooks altered, and academics silenced. In 1984, Winston Smith's job was to falsify the past, so the party's lies became the present truth, a chilling metaphor for real-world practices. Authoritarian governments have targeted universities and professors precisely because educated, critically minded individuals are the most resistant to propaganda. Even in free societies, these forces can take root. Huxley lamented that millions of citizens in democratic nations have lost interest in freedom of thought, content to live passively once their material comforts are met. When people become abnormally normal, fully adjusted to a dysfunctional society, they lose the capacity for reasoned dissent. In this way, propaganda and habitual ignorance become tools for manipulating the many to serve the few. As Huxley warned, never before have so many been so thoroughly manipulated by so few. As in 1984, truth ministries constantly rewrite history, and citizens are trained in doublethink, the ability to accept both sides of a contradiction without question. By endlessly altering facts, the party proves its dictum. Those who control the present control the past, and those who control the past control the future. In such a world, objective truth disappears, replaced entirely by whatever narrative those in power choose to impose. The message is unmistakable. Stupidity is not an accident, but a political strategy. Aldous Huxley's New World offers a different warning. Here, control is maintained not by force, but by comfort and distraction. From birth, people are conditioned to value pleasure, conformity, and superficial amusement over inquiry. Huxley observed that many citizens, especially in affluent societies, become indifferent to self-government, preferring passive entertainment to active thought. Like Pavlov's dogs, they reach for drugs and diversions rather than books or history. Such societies produce abnormally normal individuals whose minds were silenced so early they cannot even imagine rebellion. In both Orwell's and Huxley's worlds, ignorance is cultivated, through violence in one, through seduction in the other, because a population that does not think is a population that does not resist. Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 takes yet another angle. Here, the government bans books and destroys libraries, fearing that knowledge might disrupt conformity. Wall-sized televisions and constant audio entertainment keep people distracted, happy, and empty-headed. Censorship and perpetual amusement become tools for obedience. The goal is to make citizens dreamless, unquestioning, and servile. Across these fictional visions, the moral is consistent. When leaders feel threatened, they move quickly to dull public intelligence. History shows that this is not confined to fiction. Totalitarian regimes from Nazi Germany to Stalin's USSR rewrote textbooks, silenced journalists, and imprisoned intellectuals. Even in democratic societies, leaders have often resisted the spread of independent thought. As Noam Chomsky has noted, this was not a defense of oppression, but an early recognition that political and economic systems thrive when citizens are incapable of critical reflection. Modern managers, much like past rulers, often prefer people who follow orders without question. Today's authoritarians, even democracies, also grasp the value of ignorance. Information on sensitive topics are censored, Wikipedia articles are edited under control, and entire sites are blocked. Once leaders fear that citizens might think independently, they move quickly to shut down open sources of knowledge. Independent newspapers were seized, journalists arrested, and eventually Wikipedia was banned once the regime could no longer manipulate its content. In other cases, educational policy is used to restrict knowledge. Some politicians in the United States have pushed to eliminate advanced courses or reduce public library funding, claiming that an educated elite threatens populist politics. Cutting school budgets, imposing narrow curricula, or sidelining academic research are all methods designed to suppress critical thinking. As one public figure observed, when leaders feel threatened, they target educators first, because an educated populace is harder to control. The same pattern appears in political recruitment. In some systems, party structures reward loyalty over competence, leading to what has been called a negative selection of leaders. Candidates who think for themselves are sidelined, while those willing to echo whatever the leadership demands rise through the ranks. The result is that ruling elites themselves become inept and intellectually stagnant, while the general public, already dulled by media manipulation and educational neglect, fails to notice. Huxley's vision of a power elite fits this reality. They employ millions directly, and through advertising and media, shape the thoughts, emotions, and actions of nearly everyone. Yet their power rests on shallow comforts and rigid dogma, because to encourage genuine insight would be to risk unraveling their own authority. This strategy works because human psychology is naturally vulnerable to manipulation. People often fall into pluralistic ignorance, assuming that any doubts they have are unique to themselves. Believing everyone else accepts the official narrative, they remain silent. Classic conformity experiments have shown that even when an opinion is blatantly false, most people will still side with the majority half the time. Misinformation also spreads more quickly and sticks more stubbornly than factual corrections. The brain is wired to react more readily to sensational, emotionally charged falsehoods than to sober, evidence-based truths. The desire to belong adds another layer. People often adopt the beliefs of the perceived majority to avoid social isolation, even when those beliefs clash with their own better judgment. In this way, individuals reshape their opinions to fit in and may even turn hostile toward outsiders. Leaders also benefit from other psychological flaws. Complex or inconvenient facts can be brushed aside as too complicated, and some will instinctively accept that dismissal. Scholars of ignorance note that public knowledge is frequently rooted more in tradition, belief, or propaganda than in evidence. In practice, many people instinctively defer to the narrative supplied by those in authority rather than risk the discomfort of questioning them. The cost of this willful ignorance is immense. When voters are uncritical, democracy itself falters. Elections become contests of slogans and personalities where those offering simplistic promises gain an advantage. Poor leadership follows, producing bad outcomes that further erode trust and make the public more vulnerable to demagoguery. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle in which citizens grow ever more cynical and easier to manipulate. As one commentator observed, there is nothing more dangerous for democracy than a mass of politically immature citizens. When rational debate and education decline, societies drift toward a softer form of totalitarianism, a kind of psychological control. In such climates, conspiracy theories spread unchecked, genuine experts are dismissed as part of sinister plots, and public discourse devolves into rage and theatrics. For thousands of years, historians and writers have warned that no empire endures forever. The causes are many, but history shows a recurring pattern. Whenever the reins of society fall into the hands of folly or ignorance, it is only a matter of time before that society charts a course toward its own ruin. Stupidity in leadership is not simply a lack of education. Philosophers have long distinguished between mere ignorance and willful folly. Immanuel Kant described stupidity as a defect of the head, born of a flexible heart, unwilling to engage in honest self-reflection. Such a leader does not just misunderstand the facts, they stubbornly reject them. Kant warned that this kind of entrenched stupidity breeds boundless immaturity in the people they govern, undermining the very foundations of a state. Democracies and monarchies alike depend on thoughtful citizens and leaders to balance power. But when foolishness is allowed to flourish, the damage spreads. Today, social critics note that mass stupidity is not merely tolerated, it is celebrated and given authority. Once those who refuse critical thought ascend to high office, their poor judgment ripples through every level of a civilization. Ancient thinkers captured this danger in vivid allegories. In his ship of fools metaphor from the Republic, Plato describes a vessel whose captain is incapable of steering and whose quarrelsome crew fight for control. None understand navigation, but when the mutinous sailors seize the helm, they squander the supplies and neglect even the basics of seamanship. The ship's fate is inevitable. it sinks. For Plato, this was a direct warning. A state governed by unqualified, self-serving leaders is as doomed as a rudderless ship in a storm. Expertise will be dismissed, and power will fall into the hands of those least equipped to wield it. Later, historians echoed his concern. The Roman historian Livy lamented that his people could endure neither our vices nor the remedies needed to cure them, suggesting that arrogance and short-sightedness sealed Rome's decline. In the modern era, observers argue that ignorance has reached new levels in political life. Rapid technological change and the spread of propaganda allow bad ideas to circulate faster and farther than ever. Writer Tessa Schlesinger has warned that today's greatest threats, including nuclear war, are worsened by the growing ignorance of the kind of people in power and the elevation of people with limited intellect into leadership roles. The problem is stark. When unqualified, ill-informed individuals hold power, the entire society becomes weaker. Sound policy is ignored, while nonsense is promoted as truth. As one journalist wrote 2 decades ago, large parts of the world now live under the supervision of exceptionally stupid and ill-informed people, a diagnosis that feels even more accurate today. Statesmanship is too often replaced by shallow slogans and theatrical outrage, a recipe for disaster. A recurring pattern in history is that as civilizations decline, they stop rewarding excellence and instead celebrate mediocrity. In strong societies, competence earns prestige. In faltering ones, charm, flattery, and empty gestures are valued over actual skill. Novelist Eric Ambler captured this dynamic. In a dying civilization, political prestige becomes the decoration conferred on mediocrity by ignorance. In times of crisis or apathy, people often choose leaders who tell them what they want to hear, rather than those who can truly solve problems. This inversion hands the wheel to the least capable, hastening the very collapse it was meant to avert. And this pattern has repeated itself from time to time. Great powers often fall because their leaders make foolish choices. Ancient Carthage offers a striking example. Once a dominant maritime force, it could have endured far longer had its leadership understood the importance of loyalty. During the Punic Wars, Carthage relied heavily on foreign mercenaries, while Rome fought with citizen soldiers defending their own homes. When Rome's legions faced near defeat, they fought with desperate resolve. Carthage's mercenaries, on the other hand, made a simple calculation. They switched sides when the pay stopped or a better offer appeared. The city's leaders had reduced loyalty to a financial transaction, failing to see that soldiers driven only by wages will not stand firm in crisis. Historians point to this as a turning point in Carthage's downfall. The same story appears in other collapses: warnings ignored, wise advisors silenced, or short-term advantage chosen over long-term stability. In the late Roman Empire, emperors brushed aside economic and military alarms until the situation became irreversible. The signs were often obvious, but leaders either could not or would not act. The question is why rulers so often fall into such folly. The Dunning-Kruger effect describes how those with little skill or knowledge tend to overestimate their abilities. A mediocre general or politician may swagger with confidence, convinced of his own brilliance, and dismiss seasoned experts as out-of-touch elitists. When such overconfident figures gain power, their misplaced certainty turns into disastrous decisions. Compounding the problem is the spread of nonsense. Malevolent actors can devise destructive policies, and the unthinking masses will carry them out without question. In essence, clever manipulators set the agenda, and the foolish help execute it. Once stupidity takes the throne, mistakes not only multiply, they accumulate. Each bad choice builds on the last, stacking up like unstable dominoes until one more push topples the whole structure. Without reason, accountability, or humility to break the chain, collapse becomes inevitable. Philosophers, historians, and novelists all return to the same conclusion. The fate of any society depends on the wisdom of its leaders. Plato's allegory of the shipwreck warns of what happens when those at the helm are mere puppets, just as modern critics caution against entrusting power to the ill-informed. When citizens and elites let arrogance, ignorance, or greed elevate the unfit, they plant the seeds of their own destruction. Even the strongest civilization can crumble from within when competence is cast aside. The lesson for today's world is clear. We must guard against repeating these mistakes. The remnants of once great nations destroyed by folly are everywhere. To avoid joining them, societies must watch this last chapter of my video, which I am going to discuss now. Against stupidity, the gods themselves contend in vain. Yet thinkers insist we are not powerless against it. The antidote, according to thinkers from Socrates to Martin Luther King Jr., is humble, skeptical, and critical thought. Socrates famously claimed his wisdom lay in recognizing his own ignorance. This mindset means questioning our own assumptions, testing beliefs, and resisting blind loyalty to slogans or authority. Nietzsche and Bonhoeffer both warned of the herd mentality that can turn people into mindless tools for mass persuasion. Bertrand Russell added that the opinions most fiercely held are often those with the weakest rational foundation. Immanuel Kant urged, sapere aude, dare to use your own reason, and Richard Feynman summed up the scientific spirit, we are trying to prove ourselves wrong as quickly as possible because only in that way can we find progress. Robinson's work identifies 7 common triggers which we should know to become a competent person. Being out of your routine or comfort zone, working in a group or under authority, performing highly focused tasks, information overload, stress, fatigue, or emotional strain, rushing or urgency, fixation on an outcome. All 7 factors were present in disasters like the Challenger explosion. Hospitals, too, regularly combine these traps. New cases, exhaustion, information overload, urgency, leading to hundreds of thousands of deaths each year from preventable human error. Stupidity, then, is not always a fixed trait, but a temporary state of mind brought on by the wrong conditions. So how do we treat this? Socrates' famous maxim, paraphrased, "I know that I know nothing," captures the first step. Admit you don't have all the answers. The medieval scholar and explorer Galileo said something similar. Doubt is the mother of invention. William Shakespeare's Touchstone put it plainly, the fool doth think he is wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool. In our era, Nobel chemist William James observed that a great many people think they are thinking when they are merely rearranging their prejudices. This is a stark warning. Much of what we call thinking is just shuffling old biases, unless we actively challenge them. Martin Luther King Jr., writing long before the civil rights movement, stressed that true education must combat this very stupidity. He argued that schooling's purpose is to teach us to sift and weigh evidence, to discern the true from the false, the real from the unreal, and the facts from the fiction, and ultimately, to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. If students leave school unable to differentiate fact from propaganda, King warned, society is doomed. He urged cultivating character alongside intellect, reminding us that merely being smart with no conscience is not enough. Leo Tolstoy similarly praised the freethinker, one who uses their mind without prejudice and without fearing to understand things that clash with their own customs, a state of mind that is essential for critical thinking. Psychologist Elliot Aronson quipped, "The greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge." In line with this, physicist Richard Feynman said we must prove ourselves wrong quickly, and Ralph Waldo Emerson exhorted, "Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail." In other words, blaze new trails of thought instead of following the crowd. Even literary figures weigh in. Mark Twain remarked that, "It isn't what we don't know that gives us trouble, it's what we know that ain't so." In practice, that means holding even our most cherished beliefs at arm's length. Charlie Munger advises, invert problems. Think about what would cause us to be wrong rather than only justifying what we believe. This echoes King Solomon's wisdom. The first to speak in court sounds right, until the cross-examination begins. Assume you could be wrong. Ask questions. Socrates' very method was to question citizens who presumed knowledge, showing that realizing one's ignorance is wisdom. Before confidently repeating a claim, test it. Sherlock Holmes's dictum, "When you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth," reminds us to rule out errors rather than jump to conclusions. Mark Twain's translation of Einstein's insight fits. Not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. In our age of media and social networks, propaganda and echo chambers abound. Bonhoeffer warned that the stupid person deals not at all with a person, but with slogans, catchwords, under a spell. Fight this by demanding evidence. As King said, train yourself to sift and weigh evidence. Discern the true from the false. Check facts from reputable sources. Be wary of hot takes, and if something confirms your bias too neatly, double-check it. Remember Feynman's advice. Try to disprove your own idea. Discuss ideas with people who disagree. Scientists like Michael Shermer call this steel manning the other side to understand its strongest form. Bertrand Russell noted that passionately held views often have no rational basis. Being vocal or on-trend is no substitute for thinking deeply. Follow Thomas Watson Sr.'s counsel. Follow the path of the unsafe, independent thinker. Speak your mind and fear less the label of crackpot than the stigma of conformity. If a majority is blind to evidence, be the one who looks. Emerson's quote about forging your own trail fits here. The smart path is often different from the popular one. Noam Chomsky adds that the hallmark of intellectual maturity is the courage to doubt, and to consider that widely held beliefs may need questioning. Take breaks, sleep well, and slow down when making important decisions. Multitasking and distractions reduce our mental bandwidth. Simple habits help. When lost, turn off the radio and focus on navigation. Approach claims with skepticism. Play devil's advocate with your own position. Teach yourself to spot fallacies like straw man or ad hominem attacks. If a discussion's just name-calling or sloganeering, it's a red flag of unreason. A big mind is a growing mind. Benjamin Franklin said investing in knowledge pays the best interest. And Oliver Wendell Holmes reminds us, a mind stretched by new ideas never goes back to its original dimensions. Expose yourself to different disciplines and cultures. Read widely, especially materials that challenge you. Ask experts to explain concepts simply. If they cannot, you've learned something about the limits of what everybody understands. Regularly review and update your views when credible new information appears. Intelligence without ethics can still be disastrous, as King warned. Avoid the arrogance of thinking, "I'm so smart I can manipulate others." Use your intellect for constructive ends. Friedrich Schiller's context for fighting stupidity was moral. Reason must guide noble ends, not just clever means. In practice, that means listening to others kindly, admitting mistakes openly, and valuing truth even when inconvenient. Never be above re-evaluating your beliefs out of pride. As Bertrand Russell quipped, there are some ideas so wrong that only a very intelligent person could believe them. In politics and life, this translates to an engaged, vigilant mind. Read primary sources, analyze policies on merit, and act based on reasoned judgment, not catchy rhetoric. Great intellectuals, the Übermensch of minds, are those who refuse intellectual laziness. Nietzsche urged us to create our own values rather than unthinkingly inherit the status quo. In modern terms, this means designing our worldview carefully rather than borrowing it whole. By thinking deeply, even when inconvenient, and acting on what we truly learn. In doing so, we do our part to make the world better informed and wiser. So I would end my video by repeating this line. Sapere aude, dare to know. If you've watched this video all the way through, I'd like to ask one small favor. Creating content for you takes both time and resources, and it can be disheartening when a video doesn't reach many viewers. But seeing how some of you engage with it, think critically, and share your insights makes it all worthwhile. That's something I truly wouldn't trade for anything. If you'd like to support my work and enjoy exclusive ad-free content, consider joining me on Patreon. Your generosity helps me create videos without having to worry about YouTube's ever-changing algorithm, which, to be honest, hasn't been in my favor lately. Every contribution goes directly toward making higher quality, more thought-provoking content for you. The link is in the description, and thank you for being part of this journey.